Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Conventional Wisdom Podcast, part of the FreedomCast Network. I'm your host, Samuel Vernon. Welcome to episode 4. We have a lot to get to today, so I'm just going to hop right into it. And I want to discuss today about the growing divide that I perceive in our society. I don't think I'm going to focus in particular on the exact points of where we're divided, but in general, I want to talk about, as a society, our division, what I see as our divide, and more importantly, my views on how we can sort of bring people together and mend it. But as a general question, I mean, to throw it to you, what do you think the state of our society is as far as our cohesion? Are we more together than we are apart? Or are we more divided than we are united? It's not a very easy question. I think intuitively a lot of people have this idea, and they kind of get a sense and feeling when they watch the news or they're out and about in society. But I do want to talk about that today. But like I said, I don't want to get too into the weeds on the exact points on where we differ, but to the degree that there is a divide, how can we mend it? What would be the solution to unite such a large population of various cultures, beliefs, and political views and ways of life? This is certainly a difficult question to tackle, and so that's why I want to get started and hop into it pretty quickly. It would certainly seem to me that we in the West, I'll talk about the U.S. in particular, but I also will make allusions to the West in general. But it would certainly seem that here in America, we are more divided each day, it seems like to me. We probably aren't the most we've ever been divided. After all, we did go through a civil war. But it seems to me that we are slowly creeping further and further away from each other as the years pass. So the big question is, how can we bring people together? How do we unite? I want to keep our focus today on the societal level division and talk about those, since those are our biggest differences. You know, it doesn't matter if one person likes Coke and one person likes Pepsi. We're not talking about that. We're talking about fundamental differences between huge swaths of the population that threatens to pull us apart. So how are we all going to get along? So I want to talk just briefly on two solutions that are presented that I don't believe will work, but they are often presented as the way to mend this divide and for everybody to come together. And one of them is summarized beautifully in that famous song by John Lennon, Imagine. Many of you will be familiar with this song. It's extremely popular, and so popular, in fact, and the message is so moving to many people that in the beginning parts of the lockdowns, in the beginning of COVID-19, I remember a bunch of celebrities got together and they sort of put together this mashup, this montage of each one of them sort of singing a line from that song. And say what you will about the song and the celebrities, but you know, it's certainly a good message that is being presented here. Something, if I were to summarize that song, take it for what it is, it's something like, everyone stand together. We can get through this hardship. If we just unite, we can sort of abandon ideology, put down religion. There's no hunger or greed. It's all just band together as brothers, brotherhood sort of type of thing. Now, as beautiful as that message might seem, it poses much deeper questions that I don't think it even answers. It doesn't provide any answers. It just asks questions, in my opinion, this song. Because if we are all going to just unite, hold hands and unite, then what are we going to unite over? What is going to bring us together? Is it what the song suggests as just simply compassion? I hear that word thrown around way too much. I probably should do an entire episode on compassion alone, but it seems like many people throw that around as, man, if everybody would just be more compassionate, the world would be better, we would unite. Just show some compassion to your fellow man. Maybe it's out of love. We should all just feel love. It's kind of something similar to compassion. And these are sweet notions, but You hardly feel the same, if any, passion for someone living thousands of miles away compared to your family or friends close to you. In my opinion, it's a childish notion to think that what should unite everyone around the world is something like love. Not only does that sound like something written into a fairy tale, but it has no grounding in reality. Love for what? Compassion for what? These feelings, love and compassion, are fleeting feelings that sometimes they're here, sometimes they're not. They cannot unite us, and they do not have the motivation to compel us to unify when we don't feel like loving. You know, perhaps if you're married to your spouse, you love that person, and when times get tough, you know, maybe you've taken a vow to God, or you love this person deep enough to where you have a commitment to them and to your children to push through the hard times and to make it through. Okay? You don't have that with strangers down the street, let alone in another state, in another country. So I'm while this might be a beautiful message from John Lennon, this idea of everyone holding hands and singing Kumbaya is a terrible solution to try and to mend us, to bring us together. Another one that's often thrown around is kind of the opposite. If you were to go the other end of the spectrum, not exactly hate, but it's more or less like a you do you mentality. Everyone has probably heard of this idea whereby I have my set of beliefs, you've got your set, I've got my style, my lifestyle, you've got your own. So let's just leave each other alone, right? So I'll do me and you can do you. I'm not so sure that this way of thinking would do anything about the growing divide between citizens, but it at least would put less emphasis on it. So just because I'm different from my neighbor and we have various opinions and whatever, at least this solution says, okay, well, there's nothing to do to mend that divide, but I don't care how divided you are as long as you don't mess with me and I won't mess with you. That's sort of this whole mentality. This idea by itself doesn't seem too bad after all. I mean, it would be ideal if we all pretty much left each other alone. But again, just like the John Lennon thing, I think it poses some more questions, and is if you scratch a little bit deeper, it's not as easy a solution as it's presented. I don't actually think, number one, it's possible to just leave everybody alone and I'll do me and you do you. I don't believe that's possible. And I also don't believe that it's desirable. Because first of all, if the rules are I'll do me, you do you, and we're not gonna, we're just gonna go our separate ways as long as we don't negatively affect one another, who's defining negatively in this context? Maybe what my threshold is for a negative effect is the smell of cigarette smoke. If I'm surrounded by smokers, that's definitely going to be a problem. Moreover, if nothing that I do has an effect, even a negative one, on those around me, then we are just simply islands living apart from one another. And it almost by definition right there, we sort of break the social cohesion and we're no longer a society. We're all just individuals doing our own thing and not really interacting with one another. So I don't actually think philosophically it can manifest. I also think that if it were to come about and everybody would just leave each other alone, we're essentially only focused on ourselves, and over time I think that would just breed narcissists. So I don't think it's actually a great solution for society at large. But also, what about, I mean, to give the devil its due, what about my beliefs? What about our beliefs? Surely I can have my set of beliefs and you can have yours, and that's that. I'll believe in what I want, you believe in what you want. I think that's partially true, however. It starts to get a little dicey when you realize that in some form we act out our beliefs in some way. And if I'm being intellectually honest here, I don't think we all can live together with just any set of beliefs. You know, if I truly believe it's okay to murder, rape, and steal, I don't think we're going to be great living together in the same society. So our beliefs, it's not 100% true to say I have my beliefs and they're in no way connected to yours, and we can just live in a harmonious manner with wildly different sets of beliefs. I don't believe that to be the case. So I don't believe that the you do you mentality can work on a societal level. It might have some benefit in small groups and small interactions in the exact same way, by the way, that the John Lennon group, the Imagine group, can also work in a small set of people. I said on one of my previous episodes that if we're wanting to live in a communal sort of communist way, it works really well. Communism works really well in a family unit, something that's relatively small. So it also the you do you mentality also works somewhat in amongst small interactions, but I don't believe either of them are the solution to a society-wide divide. So to conceptualize this a bit better, let's think about it in terms of a game. Okay, so we have people all across society and various lifestyles, various beliefs. We need to be playing by the same set of rules, kind of like a game, so to speak. So I like this game analogy because I think it drives home, it really drives home the points that we need to make here. But as a society, we need to be playing by the same set of rules. These aren't just laws, okay? They are also social norms. They're also the rules just living in polite society. We need to be polite. That's a good a word to insert there, because we do want to live in a polite society. We don't want to create this game and nobody is polite to one another. So obviously being polite, being nice to everybody, to your neighbor, it needs to be something that's baked into this cake, so to speak. But we all need to be playing by the same rules. But what's more than that, we need to be aiming at the same goal. So the goal of this game needs to be the same for everybody. The person who believes it's okay to rape and kill and murder, they are certainly not playing by the same set of rules that we're playing, but they also don't have the same goal in mind. They have what they want to achieve in their life is drastically different than, I would say, most of us that just want to, let's just say, have a good life, live a best life. That could be a goal of this game. But I'll talk about that a little bit more later, because we'll have to expand on what it really means to live a great life or to live your best life. But it's worth noting here that this game that I'm talking about doesn't have to have one winner. We are not climbing over each other to achieve this game. It's not a zero-sum game. Everybody can win. Everybody can win when we're all aiming towards the same goal. So if I were to design this game, to just kind of think about it conceptually, just kind of back up for a second and design a game from scratch whereby it might achieve both of the same thing that we talked about earlier, the Imagine group, the unifying, everyone hold hands and sort of just come together off of love and compassion. It should achieve that, but it should also probably achieve the you do you mentality, where you've got your life, I've got mine, and we don't really have to mess with each other's lifestyles. So if I were going to design this game, I think it would want to achieve those two things. And if I'm being honest here, it's actually not too difficult to come up with a low resolution solution. So follow me here. We want something strong enough that's going to be holding us all together, uniting us, let's say. Something's got to be strong enough to do so. And it needs to be off limits to change, to mess with. Let's call that sacred, something sacred. Whatever's holding us together ought to be sacred and off limits to change. That's one criteria, so that keeps us together. But it would be even better if that thing that's holding us together, this sacred element, also has baked into it a notion of freedom. That would certainly take care of the second criteria, the you do you people. It would allow me the freedom to live my life and you the freedom to live yours, and we can't really mess with one another due to its inviolability. So, bam, right there, I have given the world a recipe for unity. Sacred freedom. And you're welcome. Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of the Conventional Wisdom Podcast. No, obviously, only kidding. Not only can I not just declare something sacred, but I really don't have to, because it already exists in the form of religion. And I do want to talk about religion because I do think it has the solution here to this divide. But before you freak out, I'm not going to exactly be talking about the theocracy involved here. I'm only going to be discussing the ethics that are extracted from this religion, namely the religions from the Bible, Christianity and Judaism. So why these religions? Let me just give you three quick reasons. The first is simply I live in the US, more broadly the West, and the Bible and its teachings have helped shape the West, so I will focus on that. Secondly, these religions inspire a sense of freedom, and I will discuss that a bit later, but they have sort of baked into the religion this idea of the freedom of the individual, which needs to be here to satisfy part of the unity that everybody needs. Lastly, of all the world's religions, I am most familiar with these, and I am myself a Christian, so I can't talk about others, but I will mainly focus on the Christianity that I know, and but specifically the Judeo-Christian ethic that has come from these religions. So we're not going to actually discuss the theocracy, the theology, let's say, of these two religions, but we will definitely be discussing the ethic that emerges from them, because I believe that this ethic, this Judeo-Christian ethic, has in it the best way to unite the largest amount of people. It has successfully done that in the West, and the West has been the greatest source of good, greatest source of innovation, the greatest source of unity among the most diverse peoples that there is. So I want to keep my focus on these religions and this ethic. So let me give you 5 reasons that sort of explain exactly what I'm talking about. So number 1, I want to talk about God-based morality. So I know I said I wasn't going to exactly talk about the theology and make an appeal to God, but all this really means is that morality is objective and not subjective. There is an actual right and wrong, no matter how we feel or what we think. Good and evil actually exists. You can think of this as the main source of glue that's going to hold us together, because if morals come from God and not man, that means that God sets the rules of the game and not us. So we cannot change it. No matter how much we want to, we simply cannot just go in and start changing the moral code of the land. We also cannot simply reject any of these moral laws because we don't feel like it. And this has phenomenal implications, because at the end of the day, who is going to hold me morally accountable? Okay, who is going to hold you morally accountable? Do you want it to be another human, or would you rather have it be a just and loving God who is setting these rules for everybody to follow? And if you think the answer is, well, everybody's going to hold each other morally accountable, I have bad news. That doesn't apply to the wealthy and powerful. How does someone with less authority, less economic status, hold those in authority accountable? But if God, who is outside of nature and not of this earth, if he sets the rules of the game, then everyone immediately becomes equally accountable. This is the part where people get understandably uneasy, because if there is an objective moral code and there is some God in the sky that's judging us and looking down on us, then it's possible for us to be in the wrong. Not just wrong in an opinion, but actually morally wrong. And no one likes to be wrong. Conversely, it's comforting knowing if there is nobody in the sky looking at you, it's comforting knowing that you can never be wrong because you make up your own morals. This is moral relativism. It's whatever I think is wrong, but only for me, and whatever you think is wrong, but only for you. What is this if not the whole you do you mentality? Again, I could say that I believe it's okay to murder, rape, or steal. So how can we live together? We cannot. And I don't want you to dismiss this idea that we need some God in the sky to tell us that murder is wrong, because everybody knows it. Everybody knows that that raping is wrong and murdering is wrong. So we all can just go on our own way because it's obvious that that's the case. First of all, I don't think it's obvious. We certainly need some sort of moral norm to say that. But also, again, I think without something as motivational and as sacred as God saying, hey, you shouldn't steal. People will let slip their morals by twisting small moral questions, and eventually you get to the big, I'm going to go ahead and steal. Even though in the back of my head, maybe I know it's wrong to steal, but, maybe, that person kind of wronged me the other day, and he really's got too much money. He doesn't really need all that money, and I'm going to go ahead and steal. And if asked on the street, that person would say, no, I don't believe it's okay to steal. But again, they've twisted small moral questions to get to the greater moral wrong of, yeah, I think it's okay to steal. And something like that can be applied to murder, can be applied to any of the moral codes. All you need to do is compromise slowly on smaller ones, and eventually you get to the big ones. My point here is that without something sacred, without something binding us together like an objective moral code that's actually wrong, not just what I feel is wrong, what you feel is wrong, but something that's actually wrong. Without something like that to bind us, it's very easy for people to separate, to start playing by their own set of rules, by making up their own morals. In fact, I could stop the list right here. That's how important this notion is. If everyone understood the significance of an objective moral standard, crime would almost be non-existent, people would be happier, life would be as close to heaven as possible. But, as we shall see, this is impossible, and understanding its impossibility is almost as important of an idea. But let's move on to number 2, liberty as a value. Taken directly from the book of Exodus, the second book of the Bible, the story of God freeing the Jews from Egypt, liberty is essential within the Judeo-Christian ethic. I differentiate here between liberty and freedom. I talked about this a bit in my previous episode on COVID, but I think maybe on a different occasion as well. And I'll say it here again because it's worth repeating. Liberty is not the freedom to do whatever we want. We cannot simply live our lives completely independent of one another. It is the freedom from things. That's what liberty is. Freedom from external bondage, as well as, I think more importantly, internal bondage. It should go without saying how vital liberty is to the flourishing of mankind. It's like being handed the keys to your own life. With enough liberty, you are free to pursue the life that you would like. With all the gifts that liberty affords, each person is free to pursue that goal, that goal that we're all going towards, the best life that they can. The value of liberty here in America is directly responsible for our First Amendment in our Constitution. That's the reason why the Founding Fathers put it at number 1, because it is that important. Wrapped up in that First Amendment is, of course, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to petition, and the freedom to assemble. All of that ensures that we have the flexibility to shape our government, to live our lives so that each one of us can be free from that tyranny, that external bondage, or even better, internal bondage, as I said. What's more is that without the value of liberty, without holding liberty as a top priority, our unity that we're trying to achieve here, trying to bring everybody together, would seem somewhat forced. So that liberty is essential to our unity. One other thing I want to say about liberty, last but certainly not least, is that liberty is not an instinct. We don't instinctually desire to be free. Our instinct is to be taken care of. To be free is to take on the responsibility of all that life throws at us. This is not only a daunting task, but it has the very real possibility of failure. It is so much easier and safer to have someone else protect us, someone else provide for us, someone else care for us. But in order for someone else to be our shepherd, that would require us to be sheep. Number 3 is forgiveness. Now, I don't think you can actually be a practicing Christian or a practicing Jew without coming across this idea of forgiveness. To err is human, but to forgive is divine. And there's certainly some divinity in forgiveness. But apart from that, it is absolutely essential for a large group of people with varying lifestyles to continue to live together when there's so many small slights, so many offenses here and there. It's essential for people to move forward, this idea of forgiveness. And unfortunately, it's largely forgot about in our world today because so many of what we do, our words and our actions, are permanently on the internet somewhere via social media. It's almost impossible to forget, let alone forgive, something dumb or hurtful that someone said 10 years ago. Because undoubtedly, somebody somewhere is going to wrong somebody else. But you have to have that redemptive element, or else you just have this perpetual cycle of revenge and personal slights. The only mechanism for stopping this without violence is to cut it off right at the source. This is in no way dismissing what they have done or denying any justice from taking place. And if you listen to my last episode, I speak a lot about justice because I feel it's very important. So we cannot dispense with justice, but we can at least remove any anger or personal vengeance that we would have towards one another with forgiveness. You can also take the converse of it and look at it the other way. Just as it is necessary for us to forgive others, it is necessary for others to forgive us. We are not perfect, as I will discuss in my next point, but very flawed, and often say and do things that we later come to regret. However, if we are not forgiven for our transgressions, how can we move beyond them? How can I demonstrate that I am a better person than I was yesterday if you believe people don't change or give them the chance? I once heard it this way: every sinner has a future and every saint has a past. We as humans have the ability to better ourselves through trial and error and should be allowed to make that personal journey towards that ultimate goal that we as a society should be striving for. Number 4, humans aren't inherently good. So kind of piggybacking on the idea that at some point we're going to offend somebody else, this is probably one of my favorite values of the bunch to come out of the Judeo-Christian ethic because it has so many implications. I will mention a few here, but I probably will do an entire other episode based on this one alone because it is so deep. But before I explain what I mean, let me first explain what I don't mean, because many people will hear this and assume I mean that humans are inherently evil. That is not what I mean. If that were the case, then all hope is lost and we shouldn't even try to make things better. What I mean is that, by default, we humans are lazy, narcissistic, liars, and we must overcome that nature in order to be good. You can think of it like this: from the beginning, when we first come to this world, we really only care about ourselves, and we expect everyone to do things for us. Anyone who has had children can see this immediately. A child isn't considerate towards other people's feelings, doesn't care what your schedule is like, and will ruin your day if you ignore them. We have to be taught to suppress that nature and to share our toys, to say thank you, to tell the truth even if it hurts us, take on personal responsibility, etc. We don't inherently do this. Almost all of the great qualities one can exhibit, such as kindness, loyalty, respect, honesty, hard work, needs to be learned and practiced in order to manifest. To understand the profundity of this, imagine the converse of it. Presuppose that humans are inherently good. I'll admit, at face value, I certainly want that to be the case. It's very comforting to believe that. However, this assumption, however comforting, is a very corrupting idea because it can logically lead to horrible outcomes. It would stand to reason that if I believed that we are inherently good, me, and I look around in this world that I'm living at and I see all the evil, all the bad ideas that are running around, all the suffering that people are experiencing at the hands of others, I would logically conclude that this evil, this suffering has to come from somewhere, from some external source. And I could take it another step further and lay it at the feet of, let's say, capitalism, or some political party, or society in general. And if I believe that we are all angels, only made devils by these external sources, then why would I not try to tear them down? One can easily see why this notion, although comforting, the idea that we are inherently good, can lead to negative effects. If I see all the evil in the world, I have to attribute it somewhere. And if it's not coming from man, it's got to come from some system. And I believe that is incorrectly targeting these systems for attack. On the other hand, though, if you believe that we are not inherently good, That implies that we need to work hard to better ourselves. Once you realize that we are not perfect the way that we are, and that we have to control a lot of our own actions and feelings, you can actually grow as a human and mature and get better, do more good. It takes the focus off of other things that need to change, other people, other systems that need to change, and directs your gaze inwardly towards you. Self-improvement. By doing this, everyone is on their own journey to better themselves, and in a sense, bring it back to our game analogy, orient themselves towards the same goal. So this idea that humans are not inherently good gives us in society a non-conflicting strategy, so to speak, to our goals, the goal of living our best life. Non-conflicting because if we're trying to go about bettering ourselves and bettering the world around us, we start by examining ourselves instead of the systems around us. Last but not least, you don't actually have to affirm a belief in the God of the Bible to hold these values. You could be a staunch atheist and find these ideas worth preserving. You don't actually have to be a practicing Christian to live your life based on these ideas. In fact, you don't have to have any particular religion at all. That's the beauty of all this. All you need to do is find the logic and utility in these rules. In fact, you can believe in whatever God you want. You are free to worship or believe in what you choose. This is also why our First Amendment is so impactful, because it's within it not only is the freedom element that I talked about in my second point, but it also, you don't have to believe in the God of the Bible. In essence, it doesn't matter what you believe. What matters is how you act. This alone has marvelous consequences for the unity of a large group of people. Actions are far more important than your thoughts, feelings, intentions, or beliefs. What would be more important to you? Let's say if somebody wished you physical harm, but that's all it did is manifest itself as in their brain, and they always treated you kindly and with respect. Or someone who wants only the best for you, has the best wishes for you, but constantly causes you harm, disrespects you, or possibly hurts you. Why would it bother me if someone believed in Hinduism as long as they lived their lives by these points, but even a few of the commandments within the Bible? If everybody didn't steal, murder, or bear false witness, meaning they didn't lie for the purposes of corrupting justice, I couldn't care less what God they prayed to. Now, this is no way advocating for atheism. I don't care if you are one, but this is not a green light to just dismiss God, but rather this is a testament to the truly inclusive culture the West has cultivated. Just because these ideas come from the Judeo-Christian ethic does not mean one must adhere to the Jewish or Christian faith. It does not take a theologian to place importance on liberty or forgiveness. Many of these ideas can be arrived at by atheists. So that begs the question, why would I need to respect any ethic that comes from a God if I can derive it by myself? And this essentially devolves into the debate for God between the believer and the atheist. I cannot simply solve that debate with one episode, nor do I think I can solve it altogether. But for now, I would simply point to my first reason on this list, God-based morality, and try to make the argument for an objective moral code being superior to the subjective code that we would make up by ourselves. I would say this though, while an atheist can appreciate the framework of the Judeo-Christian ethic, respect its customs and benefits and all that, it takes the believers in God to uphold and maintain them. Why? Partly because with a belief in God comes an intense motivation to do so, and it simply goes beyond the logic of it. Anyone can have the logic to hold liberty as a value, but only those who believe a God commanded it will properly uphold it. In other words, while I do believe it is necessary for some percent of the population to believe in the God that is responsible for the Judeo-Christian ethic, it is in no way necessary for everyone to believe in that God. You do not have to agree with the design of your house to appreciate living under its roof. Again, there are certainly more great ideas and values coming from this Judeo-Christian ethic. But these 5 ideas in particular: number 1, God-based morality, setting the rules of the game beyond our manipulations. Number 2, liberty as a value, allowing for each person to pursue their interests freely. Number 3, forgiveness as divine, moving past any personal wrongs and allowing for relationships to better improve. Number 4, we are not inherently good, turning the focus of improvement inwardly instead of demanding it outwardly. And number 5, belief in God as not necessary, allowing for a truly inclusive society. All these rules they're not designed to convince anyone of God's existence or to make you a believer in the divine. They are, however, meant to demonstrate that the best attempt at unity comes from the Judeo-Christian ethic. Is it no wonder that as we exclude the Bible from our daily lives, we have become more divided? It's not one issue, like a political issue or a law, that's driving the wedge between us, but rather we are all going about our lives by conflicting rules and aiming at different ultimate purpose. The terms of this game cannot be dictated by fiat nor created arbitrarily, but rather come from something much greater: an ethical framework rooted within the Judeo-Christian religions. This framework has been the greatest source of social cohesion and tolerance amongst the most diverse countries in the world. So it turns out that the solution to the growing divide, the source of unity, is found in the conventional wisdom of the Bible. Conventional Wisdom is a FreedomCast production. You can visit us at freedomcast.us, or if you'd like to support our work, you can go to freedomcast.locals.com. We'll see you there.